Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. Nature is wild on the regular. That is, what happens out there on a relatively normal basis often strikes us humans as strange because there's so much we don't see. Well, over at the St. Louis Zoo, there's a visitor who exemplifies that phenomenon, a western rat snake with 2 heads, 2 brains, and 2 different temperaments named Tiger Lily. And Missouri Department of Conservation naturalist Lauren Baker joins us now to talk about caring for this uncommon-to-us creature. Lauren, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So let's start with the thing in the intro. What are Tiger Lily's pronouns? I mean, should we refer to Tiger Lily as she or they?
Yeah, for sure. So what I say is when I'm talking about the 2 heads and their different personalities or anything like that, I always say they, them, because I'm talking about 2 different individuals. But when it comes to the body, they're all connected. Okay. So it's one individual body, 2 heads. So for the body, she, her, the heads, they, them.
So what is it then that is unusual about Tiger Lily as far as western rat snakes go?
Yeah, so there's the obvious factor that she's got 2 heads. It's not often that you come across a western rat snake that has 2 heads. It's somewhat uncommon, but actually less uncommon than we think. We do have another 2-headed western rat snake in our care in the Department of Conservation. If you go down south to the Cape Nature Center, we have another black rat snake or a western rat snake that has 2 heads on display as well.
And this is something that happens when an embryo does not fully separate into 2 fully formed twins?
Correct, yeah. Okay. So what happened was when Tiger Lily, they were in the womb, what would have happened is to become 2 identical twins, they would have split in the womb, starting with the head. So they were obviously past the head at that point, and then the egg that formed around the embryo formed too soon before she could fully separate, or they could fully separate. And that egg just happened to form before they were done splitting into 2 individuals. So, yeah.
And so this part about it's not being as uncommon as we think, what is it that accounts for that?
Yeah, so there's not a lot of data that comes with how many 2-headed western rat snakes are produced in Missouri. We don't, go out and search for 2-headed rat snakes. That is not on the forefront of what, we're trying to work on. So there's not a whole lot of data that comes with this sort of stuff. So we don't know exactly how many are produced. We do know that a lot of, western rat snakes are produced each year, but how many of those are 2-headed rat snakes? How many of those survive long enough to make it to adulthood? We don't know.
Right.
So.
And that part about making it to adulthood, how hard a time do 2-headed snakes have surviving in the wild? And why is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. So our 2-headed snakes, it's very hard for them, especially, coming out of an egg as a hatchling. It's hard for them to understand that these, their 2 different brains are connected to that one body. They're each trying to do their own thing and, find shelter or food or whatever they need to survive, but they're connected. So when they're babies and they're born, they're struggling to move around, they're struggling to find that space to hide in, and they're easily preyed upon by other animals. So we don't see a lot of 2-headed individuals making it to adulthood.
Yeah. So let's get a little bit of that backstory then about how you came to care for Tiger Lily as a visitor to the St. Louis Zoo rather than a permanent resident.
Yeah. So Tiger Lily's stay with us at Powder Valley is brief, or is scheduled to be brief. She's been with us since the end of January.
Okay.
Typically where she stays and where individuals can see her is at the fish hatchery in Branson. It's called Shepherd of the Hills. At this time, they're getting a new visitor center, so a brand new building, and they thought that this would be a really good time to do a tour of nature centers with Tiger Lily. So she was originally scheduled to leave Powder Valley a couple weeks ago, but then she had a quick trip to the zoo for her surgery.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So the surgery.
Yes.
Tell us about the surgery.
Yeah, so it was not something we were necessarily looking for, but we are really lucky to have the St. Louis Zoo who helped us with our two-headed gal and her medical needs. So it was during a public feeding where we feed Tiger Lily for an audience that you can get up close and see her. What happened was Lily actually sneezed up a few traces of blood, which set a red flag with us at the Powder Valley location. So we got her into the St. Louis Zoo veterinary team who has seen some of our animals before. And I got to be in the room for it. They did a scan, an ultrasound of her insides to figure out what might produce, that sneezing up traces of blood. And they found that it was her ovaries that had grown follicles, and those follicles never reabsorbed.
Okay.
So they decided, after consultation with the Shepherd of the Hills staff, to go ahead and do the surgery.
Okay. And how's she doing today?
She's doing fantastic. She's very much getting back to her normal self. She just shed, which is really neat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I came in this morning and one head was completely shed and one's working it off. So, yeah.
So what are some of the other components of caring for Tiger Lily? So you mentioned the public feeding.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. So we don't do public feedings at the moment since she's off display.
Right.
But the way we have to feed her, and we did do this previously, and I'm sure they'll continue to do it for the public, but what we have to do is take a little solo cup, like a rinse and spit cup that your dentist would give you at a visit. And we've cut the bottom out.
Okay.
So when we feed, we have to place one Dixie cup over one head.
Okay.
Feed one head and then alternate once that mouse is fully processed.
Oh, and why is that?
And that is because there's Tiger who has a longer neck and Lily who has a shorter. And Tiger can actually whip her head around and take that mouse out of Lily's mouth if she's feeling especially hungry. So
it has happened.
It has.
Okay.
There's a reason for the snaky cup of shame. So, yes.
And then as far as the way Tiger Lily looks, so just to provide sort of a visual, how big is she?
Yeah.
Heads to tail.
Yeah, absolutely. So she's about 3 feet long. And she lives in a little exhibit, traveling exhibit that she will curl up in. So when she becomes available for the public to see her, I'm sure it's not easy to get a look at her because she really loves folding up underneath her little hide rock. So you'll just see 2 heads sticking out, maybe not the whole length of her. But
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So the most interesting part, perhaps, is what you'll see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And insofar as the feeding part, why is it that it is important to feed both heads if they're sharing a stomach?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really frequent question that I get from visitors is why do you feed both heads?
Yeah.
And I liken it to whenever you get a smoothie from the gas station. You're wanting a little something because it's hot outside. And an hour later, you're going, I want some Cheez-Its or something like that. Okay. Like, I'm still hungry. So it's that feeling of or that mental need of needing to eat and physically, be able to take in, something solid in order for your brain to feel satiated.
Okay.
So if we were to just feed one head, let's say we're feeding Tiger and Lily's not eating.
Yeah.
Tiger, the body will do fine. They'll live. But Lily's going to be a little bit more sassy with us than Tiger will be.
Okay. And this gets to this point about temperament that we mentioned in our promos and in the introduction. These 2 heads means they have 2 independent brains and temperaments. Is there ever a time you've seen Tiger and Lily disagree?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, that is kind of a frequent sisterly thing that they do. They've been around for 6 years, going on 7 years, so they've had their little scuffles for sure, but you can see they both control the body when they're moving around their enclosure. So I've seen in the past, sometimes they'll form like a little T and get as far away from each other as possible sometimes when they want to break. And they're able to kind of argue over who's moving the body at what time. And usually you can see if someone really needs a drink of water and someone else is interested in doing something else, that body will follow to the water, and the one head is getting dragged, to the water dish because the one really needs to drink. So yeah, they do have their little sisterly scuffles.
Okay.
So,
well, how can you tell then when Tiger Lily is happy? For example, does she make any sounds? You mentioned the sneeze earlier. Is that something that you just see, or do you hear that?
Yeah, so you definitely hear little snaky sneezes for sure. They can be quiet to, a little bit louder, but typically her happiest self is going to be sitting under her rock and, being fairly inactive because she's full. She's, quenched of thirst, and she is resting, and she's happy.
Okay.
Or they are happy.
Right.
Her easiest and happiest self is going to be the one that's resting.
Okay. Now, what is it that people should do, Lauren, if they spot a conjoined twin like Tiger Lily in the wild?
Yeah. So, I always say there's, two different things you can do with this. If you find a two-headed snake in the wild, there's two routes that you can go. You can become really involved with that two-headed snake and try and they don't very much last through adulthood. So, if you have a local wildlife rescue around or something like that can, assist that snake if that snake is really ill or struggling.
Yeah.
Or the other option is to leave it be, because nature is nature and it will take its course.
Right.
So I always recommend the latter. Nature takes its course and does what it does, and that's just part of it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So part of the reason you're here is that Tiger Lily has another claim to fame, and that's going viral. So did that exposure bring about some benefits from the naturalist perspective?
Yeah, I really believe so. I think that Tiger Lily is a very unique snake to have around, and I think that she shares this message of, I'd say, almost perseverance and hope with the public. Not only getting them familiar with snakes and starting to interact and care for snakes, because I didn't think this many people would be interested in a snake. Typically it's, no, get that snake away from me.
Right.
But also she's representative of an individual who has made it. She's, outlived what, we originally thought she would as a two-headed snake. It's crazy that she got found in the first place, and we are happy to keep supporting her and giving her whatever she needs to survive as long as she's with the Department of Conservation.
Yeah.
So,
is there anything that we can learn about conjoined twins, animal twins in nature and captivity? Yeah.
So typically you're gonna see two-headed individuals in captivity. It's rare to come across them in nature. Thinking about, Missouri's native nature. Now, for two-headed individuals who live in nature, there's a good possibility that maybe they can get along with having two heads, and maybe they do survive. But things with two heads can struggle, and I think that can be a big downfall that, we can see and, watch in nature as far as captivity versus that wild element for sure. So
I'm sure people are wondering about what is next for Tiger Lily.
Yeah.
And can people see them while she's still at Powder Valley?
Yeah, so right now she is at Powder Valley, but she's behind the scenes, and that means that she's my office mate. Okay. She and I share a desk. So at this time, she is off display as she's recovering from her recent surgery. Now, as far as being displayed in the future, I know Shepherd of the Hills will come and pick her up within the next several weeks. She has a vet check at the St. Louis Zoo next week to make sure she's doing great, which I believe she is. She's looking great and acting totally, perfect. So, she'll be moving on to Shepherd of the Hills and then eventually to Kansas City, where I'm sure she'll be back on display. So, yeah.
Lauren Baker is a naturalist with the Missouri Department of Conservation. Lauren, thanks so much for talking with us today about Tiger Lily.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
This episode was produced by Emily Woodbury.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
St. Louis on the Air proudly supports local artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.